What is going on, you guys? It's your boy Joe Castro, aka Philly Fresco, and it is another Philly the podcast episode. And today I came with a friend, man. At this point, you know, as many times as I've had you on here, Fran, you are family, so I might as well say that, right? But no, I'm excited to have Fran back on the show. How you doing today, man?
I'm doing great, Joe. No, I appreciate you having me on. It's fun this time of year, right? Obviously, the news and the analysis is not like flowing every day. There's not as much to react to, but still fun to be able to talk birds.
Definitely. And I was able to see you at the combine, which was an awesome experience, you know, and we've been able to see the combine. We saw the draft. We had a great draft. We add some really good personnel. We add some good staff. What do you think, looking at everything that's happened so far, it might be the most important to the success for the future of this team?
You know, I think obviously, look, it's exciting, right? Because the team had a great draft. For all intents and purposes, everybody, the process looked great, right? And we'll see how the players play once they get on the grass. But I think at the end of the day, there's a lot to be excited about with this football team, right? With the new coaches, with the new players, as you mentioned, the guys that are coming back, the building blocks, getting Jalen Hurts' deal done. Like, that's not hanging over anybody's head now going into the summer. So I think really there's a lot to be excited about, but every year it's a new team, right? And Jason Kelce talks about this every single training camp. It feels like now the last few years, where expectations are just that. It's literally like there's nothing to that. There's nothing concrete to that. So you can go in with high hopes and get punched in the face and not be ready for it. So this is a team that is very process oriented. They're going to take it one day at a time, and that's the way you have to approach this every single year. And I think that's the way they're going to go into the season, knowing that this is going to look a little bit different on both sides of the football. You lose both coordinators, you lose some players, especially on defense. So it's going to look a little different. But how does this team, the 2023 Philadelphia Eagles, how are they going to win games on Sundays? And that's something that they're in the process of finalizing and crystallizing, and it'll all come to a head in about a month and a half, 2 months.
Yeah, time is going by fast. I'm not going to lie. This off season has felt like it's gone pretty quick, and it's because we've gotten a good amount of news. The Eagles haven't really slept and stood on their laurels. They've made a lot of moves. And like you said, this has been a very good process. I know saying process might kind of trigger a couple Sixers fans right now after what happened, but it has been, and we've seen this process from the beginning and how much it's matured. So I'm so excited to see what we're going to do this year. But you talked about the draft. We've spoke about the draft in length, but I want to ask you, because I feel like in 5 years this is going to be a thing, but like, where were you when the Jalen Carter news broke that he was going to be an Eagle? What was your first initial reaction to it? Just kind of walk me through what happened when you heard that.
Well, I was sitting in our office here at the NovaCare complex, and we were not live yet. We were not going to go live this year until after the first round ended. And so, I wasn't like, oh, I've got my suit on and ready to go, and like, all right, here's the pick. Now we're going live. It was kind of sitting back and enjoying, and kind of, it was fun actually. Kind of watching the draft as a fan, for the first time in a while, right? Where I could kind of sit and kind of watch the broadcast and bounce back and forth between ESPN and NFL Network, and just kind of take it all in, and knowing we weren't going to go live until the end of the night. So it got a little crazy at pick 30 with Nolan Smith, because I knew we're going to be on air in 10 minutes, 15 minutes talking about this. But with Jalen Carter, as soon as they make the move up to 9, right? Like, all right, like this is the pick. So it was very exciting. The Eagles got clearly one of the best players in this draft.
Yeah, it was a fun experience all around, just being able to see them do what a lot of mock drafts said was nearly impossible. I can't think of one mock draft, and there was millions of them. I can't think of one where you have Nolan Smith at 30 and Jalen Carter at 9 or even 10. So it was definitely a beautiful time. Now, this is kind of like a personal question. Obviously, we see Jason Kelce kind of, it seems like he's training to be broadcast after his football career. I wanted to know, since this is obviously what you do, what type of advice would you give him if he was to ask?
Well, if he were, first of all, he's already way better at it than I am. I should be going to him for advice.
Better than all of us.
So, no, I think to me, when it comes, and this is with everything, whenever you're outward facing, if you're, a coach doing a press conference, a GM doing a press conference, players doing media afterwards, right? Just be genuine, be yourself. And if you have like that right energy, like that will come out. But there's nothing worse than watching, a media personality go through it, and you could just tell that it's not real, it's not genuine, that it's fake, and it's being forced. And so, but I don't think that's ever going to be an issue with Jason Kelce. We're just over a year from when he did that first. He was, remember, he was live, I believe it was for Bleacher Report, right? He was doing analysis for the draft in 2022 when they selected Cam Jurgens, and he was all excited. And I remember talking to him after that and saying, that was, hey, like, because I went back and watched it just to see like how he did, and he was awesome. But like that was he's had a lot more training since that point, right? So he does not need advice from me, that's for sure.
Yeah, no, he's been awesome. His podcast is amazing. It's something that I think a lot of fans needed. I think that's the type of stuff that football fans were lacking for a long time. So it's beautiful to see what him and his brother are doing. Now we've talked about obviously the additions. We've talked about the new guys on this team. Is there an area of the team that you're still looking at and maybe thinking the Eagles should improve upon, or maybe are looking to improve upon in this coming off season?
Yeah, I don't know. I think that there's obviously some unknowns in terms of like young guys stepping in and some new faces, So, you kind of want to let that play out a little bit and just see like, all right, what exactly do we have? And whether that's once you have these mini camps kind of come to a close here this month, or whether you get into training camp. Because remember, Howie Roseman, they're going to add players like 365 days a year. Like, this is not something where it's like, all right, draft's over. Like, all right, we'll see you guys at the end of training camp or final cuts, right? And he always makes the joke every year when reporters call it final cuts. It's like, no, there's nothing final about this. This roster is going to continue to evolve, just like it did last year when the team added C.J. Gardner-Johnson after those cuts, right? So, I think when you look at this roster, it's always going to be fluid. They're always going to be looking to find ways to improve, whether that's a big addition like a James Bradbury or C.J. Gardner-Johnson, which happened after this date a year ago, or if it's something small and you go on the margins and you're trying to find a guy here or there that, maybe the future Marcus Epps, right? Where he was acquired after the final cuts. He was a waiver claim, I want to say in September of that year, coming from Minnesota. And they were able to kind of, sit him and stash him and develop him, and he became a starter for a couple of years. And I think that, you're always trying to find ways to improve your football team.
Definitely. And I feel like, you say sit and stash, you think of our draft class last year. This year, obviously, it's a totally different year, so it's a totally different mentality. But I wanted to ask you, do you believe that Jalen Carter will have a big impact this year one, or is it kind of a sit back and learn year, if that's a good term to use? Or do you think he's going to have a big impact this year?
Yeah, I think that the opportunity is there. Now he's got to go and take it, right? But the opportunity is certainly there when you lose Javon Hargrave, who played a ton of snaps, a ton of impactful snaps on the interior. Now the team went out, they signed like a guy like a Kentavious Street. You're hoping for an increase in snaps from Milton Williams and from Jordan Davis, right? So there are guys there on the interior, even when, bringing back Fletcher Cox, that guys like BG can slide inside and give you some reps inside as well on passing downs. And so, if Carter is not ready to take that step, then you have other guys that can step in there. Marlon Tuipulotu coming back from injury, right? He can supply some depth there off the bench. So you have a lot of bodies there on the interior, but with his talent, like if he's ready to go, like he's going to be ready to go. So that's going to be fun to watch. Certainly one of the big storylines early in training camp.
Definitely. And looking at that last year's draft class again, obviously I felt like they picked a lot of those guys for this year, for this upcoming year, knowing that there was going to be fluidity, there was going to be a lot of turnover. What of those guys from last year do you look at and maybe are excited to see their opportunity to step up? Or who do you think maybe has the biggest opportunity to take a big leap in year two?
I am excited to see Nakobe Dean in year two, right? You lose TJ Edwards and you lose Kaiser White. They bring in Nicholas Morrow in free agency, and we'll see if he's able to take one of those other starting jobs or if it goes to one of the other young players on the roster. Like, Davion Taylor is still here in Philadelphia. Like, I'm interested to see what he looks like here this summer. But to me, like watching what Nakobe Dean looks like here in year two, he got to kind of step back and take in year one and get acclimated to the NFL game. What does he look like in year two? I think that's going to be one of the things I'm most excited to see this summer.
Definitely. And I posed this question to a bunch of the subscribers when we did like a little call-in show. And I want to ask you as well, because I feel like they're all across the board. We have a bunch of positional battles, a bunch of just good players, battling good players for spots in this team. What's a position battle that you're looking at and just saying, I'm excited to see these guys get out there and just fight?
I mean, I'm excited to see the depth at corner get tested. Right, that was a question last year around this time. Is like, what is the depth at corner? And now all of a sudden, you have Slay and Bradbury, but you have a young player and going into his third year in Zach McPherson. You signed Greedy Williams, a former second-round pick who many thought was a first-round talent the year he came out. You bring Kaylee Ringo, he's a first-round talent, a guy that everyone was shocked was there when the Eagles were able to trade up for him at the start of the fourth round. You have a lot of these bodies there on the back end. I'm excited to see how that shakes out. Slay and Bradbury are going to start, right? But what is the pecking order after that? I think that's going to be a lot of fun. Josh Jobe in his second year, an undrafted free agent who was on the 53 for the majority of last year. And so excited to see that cornerback battle shake out. Obviously, linebacker and safety are probably more impactful, but corner, I'm just more excited to see just because of the talent influx at that position.
Yeah, and I love the just culture of competition that we've seen built over realistically like the past half a decade. I feel like even going back to Doug Peterson's kind of tenure towards the end, you saw more competition, but Nick Sirianni especially has really kind of wanted to force that in. How well, and I think we kind of see it from guys coming back, but how well do you think he succeeded in kind of having that competition culture embedded in his team and they just bought into it?
Yeah, I mean, it's something that we talked about this on the podcast last year. We talked about this on Eagles Game Plan last year. As the Eagles, they kind of cemented themselves as one of the elite teams in the 2022 season. You look at Nick Sirianni and his core philosophies that he outlined the day he took the job, and he outlined, there's billboards all around the building, out in the hallway with like those core philosophies, right? They connect and compete, and you go down the list. And this team kind of embodies all of that. And he talking about like the goals he wanted to set in terms of like explosive plays and protecting the football and pressure on the quarterback, all those different things, turnover margin, like that this team hit all of those boxes. They hit all of those landmarks over the course of last year, and so that's a ton of credit to the head coach and to the general manager and to the coordinators for like saying, okay, here's the vision, here are our goals, let's go reach it. And they were able to reach all of that last year, and they came on the precipice of winning a Super Bowl. So I think that's something that they're going to continue to try and do. You can't say, hey, this is what we did last year, and now that's just going to happen naturally this year. You still have to build that up. Yeah, there's certainly some equity built in there. There's a lot of carryover from last year's roster this year, but with so many new faces, you've got to re-ingrain all of that. And it always helps too when you have the leader of your team, your quarterback, your franchise quarterback now after the contract, who kind of he's the straw that stirs that drink, right? He pushes those same messages to the roster in the locker room that you're getting in the meeting room from the coaches.
Yeah, Jalen Hurts is pushing you some quotes. Yeah, I like that. The straw that stirs the drink. I like that. I'll use that for that.
There we go.
And you look at this defense, and this is going to be probably a tough question to really even answer. But you look at Desai, you look at the amount of weapons that we really have on the defense. I've said this over and again. I feel like there's so many guys that can do so many different things. What do you think is going to be the overall plan for Sean Desai? What do you think, or what is the best option for him to do as a defensive coordinator, kind of looking at his history? How do you feel he'll gel with this defense?
Yeah, I mean, I think schematically, a lot of that is going to be, on the table. We're gonna kind of get a sense of how that goes. We remember just a couple of years ago, in Nick Sirianni's first summer here, no one really had a great handle on exactly what he wanted to do, how he wanted to play, and this went for both sides of the football, and that was by design. They said, that's an advantage for us in the first quarter of the season. So my guess is they're going to be pretty tight-lipped in terms of what the defense is going to look like here this year. But I would imagine, look, you're not going to. There's only, and Sean Desai talked about this in his press conference. Like, there are only so many different ways you can deploy 11 guys, right? Like, there's only so many. You talk about like coverage shells and safeties, and he was asked about too high looks, and he said, look, when we give a look to the quarterback before the snap, it's either going to be two high safeties that stay too high, two high safeties that roll to one high, or it's one high safety pre-snap that stays one high, or it's one high safety that rolls to two high. That's it. Those are the four. There's nothing extra after that. There's only 11 guys. There's only a handful of defensive backs out there. So all the different looks, all the different things that you do, it's you're limited there, right? And so it's all about trying to adapt to your personnel and lean into their strengths. And certainly they've got some quality players on that side of the football that they're going to be able to do that with.
Yeah, it's going to be very, very interesting to see what we become, because going from last year, obviously we were very good. I had a very productive defense, but now you have so many different types of players, but still high level players. So it's going to be awesome to kind of see what they become. Now you look at last year again, you know what I'm saying? And you look at what we did in terms of being basically the second best team in the NFL, I guess you could say, right? We're no longer that underdog. We're no longer that team that everybody kind of doubts. What do you think is going to be the mentality going into this next season for the team with that? Yeah, I mean, Jalen Hurts is used to people kind of doubting him. I don't think anybody's doubting him anymore. How is this going to affect the team going into this year, in your opinion?
I mean, you got a target on your back. Everyone, all the preseason prognostications, all the headlines you got last year, the headlines here this offseason. I think that every team coming into this year, like, no one is looking past the Philadelphia Eagles. No one is looking past Jalen Hurts in this offense, and so even no one's looking past this defense after a 70+ sack season last year. So they're going to have a target on their back. Every single game is going to be a battle. It's not going to be sunshine and rainbows all season. They're not going to win double digits every single week. There are going to be some ugly wins in there against teams that people would say, oh, they should have blown this team out. What are they doing? What are they doing? Like, they're going to get every single team's best shot. And so you got to be ready to run that gauntlet. They faced that in 2018. They still went back to the playoffs after that Super Bowl run. But they're going to face a similar kind of challenge here this year with a very difficult schedule.
Definitely. And I got two more questions for you, and then I'll let you get out of here. I want to know, because we've talked about, Hurts, we've talked about AJ, all the fans talk about the same guys. I want to know, is there a guy on this team that isn't being talked about enough, in your opinion, that might have a really big impact next year?
I might have a really big impact. That's a good question. Obviously, look, a lot of the big names we know about, right? Like, there isn't like that AJ Brown edition where you're like, oh man, like, I can't wait to see what he looks like. Like, all right, like the offense comes back. I think that people still kind of sleep on Dallas Goedert and like the where he ranks in terms of the tight ends in the NFL. This guy just does everything well. He's excellent after the catch, and that's all, to me, like, that's a separator at the tight end position in terms of guys that, like, how do you get away from like that huge clump of good starters and become a great player? Like, that's where Dallas can make his mark. He's a what in baseball you would call like a 5-tool player. Like, he can block and run game, pass game. He runs routes. He's athletic. He's a good receiver. He's plays after the catch. Like, does everything that you want at the position, and he does it at a high level. So, and there's only a handful of guys in the NFL that can do that, and I think Dallas is one of the best. So, I guess for me, it might be Goddard, but that's a weird answer, because obviously we've seen what Dallas Goedert has been able to do, right? So it's tough. It's a really good team though.
Yeah, it's going to be it. The offense is going to be crazy to watch, because if everything goes well, everybody stays healthy, I don't know how you really stop this offense. I don't know who this is really the definition of pick your poison. So it's going to be a lot of fun. Now, obviously, lastly, I want to talk about the schedules came out. This year, the Eagles run the gauntlet. I don't even know if the gauntlet is a good word for it. Whatever's worse than a gauntlet, they run that. What's a matchup that you kind of maybe have circled? Is there one that you're excited for more than others coming up?
I don't know if there's one that I'm one of the people that is like, oh, the schedule's out, like, cool. Like, I'm one of those people. It's always fun, and I always, like, personally, selfishly, I'm looking like, all right, like, like holidays and like birthdays and family stuff. Like, I always look at that from a matchup standpoint. Like, I already knew, like, all right, like they got a tough schedule. So, like, what does that stretch look like? I'm still like wrapping my head around the fact that they have 3 games in the 1 o'clock slate the entire season. That is wild, wild to me. So that makes it a little tough, but No, to me, like, look, New England week 1 is really going to be interesting. That's a team that is going to be a little bit of a new look offensively, and so that's going to be a big thing to watch over the course of the summer. Is like, what are the big changes with Bill O'Brien taking over as offensive coordinator? There's going to be a lot of energy and emotion in the building with Tom Brady being honored that week, and so there's going to be a lot of buzz there that week. Obviously, a Super Bowl rematch from Super Bowl 52, so there's going to be a lot of discussion there, I'm sure. But obviously, look, I mean, Cowboys is going to be big. They play the 49ers, they play the Chiefs, they play the Bills, they play a bunch of really quality teams here this season. So it's going to be a tough one. And this team last year was 1 week at a time, 1 week at a time, 1 week at a time, and they're going to need to repeat that here this year.
Yeah, I'm the same way. Week 1 is probably the one I'm most excited for. They're overpricing on the tickets. I'm originally from Connecticut, you know what I'm saying? So I have kind of a history with the Patriots. So yeah, let's go out there and just ruin their Brady day. That would be beautiful for me. But do you have anything coming up you want to let the people know about? I know you got something to go to right now. Busiest man in NFL, but I'm telling you right now. But is there anything we should be on the lookout for?
Yeah, I mean, we're doing the I'm still wrapping up the recaps of the draft over on the Journey of the Draft podcast and kind of going division by division. I had a podcast that dropped last week with Greg Cosell where he and I went through the Eagles draft class, kind of went pick by pick there and talked about the additions to the team. I've got some other Eagle Eye in the Sky podcasts coming your way. We were just talking about the schedule. My plan is to start taking a deeper dive into the first handful of opponents. So hopefully that'll be on the way here in the next few weeks.
Definitely. Well, I'll be reaching back out to you, man. We'll definitely have you back on the show and we'll kick it a little bit longer. I appreciate your time so much, man. It's always a pleasure. But other than that, you guys know what it is, man. We are out of here. Fly Eagles fly. Peace.